What if your most attractive quality wasn't your looks, status, or words, but your presence? In a world loud with self-promotion and empty noise, there's something undeniably powerful about a person who moves with quiet confidence. Someone who doesn't chase attention, yet draws it, who doesn't talk much, but says everything through how they carry themselves. This video reveals 11 quietly powerful habits that make people naturally respect, admire, and remember you, rooted in Stoic wisdom. These traits aren't about manipulation or performance. They're about authenticity, inner strength, and how you choose to live when no one's watching. If you've ever felt overlooked, misunderstood, or unsure how to express your value, watch closely. These subtle yet profound shifts can transform the way others see you, without you ever raising your voice. Because real attraction doesn't beg for approval. It stands still and lets the world come to it. Inner self-mastery. True attraction begins with the path you choose to walk. Have you ever met someone who didn't speak much, didn't try to stand out, yet still drew every gaze toward them? Not because of their looks, not because they entered the room with grandeur, but because they brought with them a certain energy, a grounded calm that comes from within. That's the mark of someone with intention, someone who lives by their own principles, someone who isn't swayed by praise or criticism and doesn't live to please the world. It's the quiet magnetism of self-mastery, and it is the root of every quality that makes you likable, trustworthy, and memorable. Self-mastery doesn't mean pushing people away or proving you don't need anyone. It simply means this: you don't need permission to be yourself. You live by the values you've chosen. You make decisions based on what truly matters, not out of fear of missing out, fear of judgment, or fear of being left behind. In a world constantly pressuring you to become someone else, the self-mastered person is the one who knows exactly who they choose to become. But this state isn't easily attained. There will be moments of self-doubt. There will be days when everyone around you moves in one direction, and you find yourself walking the other alone and full of questions. But it is in those moments that you are training the most important muscle of all, your inner strength. Inner strength is something no one can take from you. It doesn't come from achievements or recognition. It is built from the decisions you make each time you choose your principles over pleasing the crowd. People who live with intention are never in a rush. They don't try to prove themselves. They don't strain to impress. They understand what doesn't align will naturally fall away. What is meant to stay will stay. And because of that, they don't need to be the brightest version of themselves. They only need to be the most consistent and authentic version. Self-mastery is a process, not a preset state. It requires you to observe your inner world daily, to be awake enough to ask, is this decision rooted in my values or in my fear of being left behind? To be brave enough to walk your path even when no one cheers, no one agrees, no one sees. Because you don't walk to be applauded. You walk because it is the right path. When you live with self-mastery, you don't need to declare anything out loud. The calm in your gaze, the consistency in your choices, the steadiness in your steps. These are the boldest statements you can ever make, and that is what draws people in. Not because you're trying to impress, but because you don't need to. Grace in stillness, when the way you show up says more than any introduction. There are people who walk into a room and, before they even speak, cause the room to pause. Not because they're dazzling, not because they're loud, but because a calm, mature, balanced energy surrounds them, as if they don't need to become anyone else to stand out. And that is what makes them stand out. True grace isn't found in elegant words. It lives in the subtle control one has over oneself, in every step, in the way you lift your chin, the way you hold someone's gaze, place your hands, listen, respond. These small things form a presence that no script or mask can fake. The Stoics knew this well. Seneca once wrote, "Silence is a lesson learned through suffering. Sometimes, silence is the greatest proof of inner strength, because you don't need to speak loudly if you've already learned to control yourself in stillness. In a world that rushes, where people are easily triggered by urgency, and the fight to be heard, quiet grace is a rare form of power. It comes from not letting emotions drive your actions, from not reacting impulsively, from maintaining a steady internal state even when others lose theirs. You don't need to be the center of conversation to be noticed. When you listen with full attention, when you choose your words carefully rather than speaking just to speak, when you stay composed even under pressure, you naturally become the center without needing to step forward. Grace also lies in not performing too much. You don't need to flaunt your knowledge, prove anything, or fill every silence with words. You allow space to breathe, for yourself and for others. And in that stillness, others find calm and trust. In real life, I once watched a man in a high-pressure meeting speak only twice in 30 minutes. But both times, the room paused. Because he wasn't filling silence, he was delivering something that truly needed to be said. His quiet strength made everyone listen. Practicing graceful stillness isn't just about staying silent. It's about choosing silence intentionally, knowing when your words add value and when stillness says more. You don't need to force yourself to be interesting. You only need to remain grounded amidst the things that would normally shake you. Walk with clarity and quiet confidence, not in a rush, not trying too hard. That is what makes you different. The gracefully silent are not cold people. They are people who manage the energy they bring into a space. They don't become victims of emotion. They aren't swept up by the atmosphere. They choose to stay centered. And in a chaotic world, that's the rarest kind of power. The deepest kind of attraction doesn't come from surface appearance or outward performance. It comes from how you hold your inner space and how that radiates through the world. In every gesture, every word, every nod. And when you become that intentional, you no longer need to introduce yourself. Your presence has already said everything. Poise is a statement. The smallest details reveal who you are before you even speak, before you say a single word. Others have already begun to read you through the way you dress, the way you care for yourself, the way you walk into a space. Whether you realize it or not, every little detail is sending a message. And a truly poised person is not someone obsessed with perfection, but someone who understands this simple truth. Your appearance is the opening chapter of a long story about self-respect and personal values. We live in a world full of noise, where many try to prove themselves with flashy words, yet overlook the simplest form of self-expression: neatness and self-respect shown through small, daily actions. The subtle fragrance you choose in the morning, the shoes you keep clean, the shirt you press, the direct, steady gaze you offer, all of it are words without sound. You don't need to be flashy. You don't need luxury brands. But a poised person always leaves the impression that they have standards. They respect themselves and others. They are someone you can trust, because if they take themselves seriously, they're likely to be serious about their promises, their goals, and their behavior. Stoicism doesn't teach us to be cold or rigid. On the contrary, Marcus Aurelius once said, "Let your external appearance be simple and dignified, reflecting the serenity of your mind." Simplicity and dignity on the outside are a reflection of a well-trained inner life. You don't need to chase society's standards to look attractive. You only need to make yourself clear, clean, and in harmony with the values you live by every day. Because poise is not just about looks. It's in how you manage your time, how you reply to messages, how you respond to invitations, how you prepare for meetings. Someone who lives with structure and responsibility carries a quiet yet powerful charm. You don't need to promote yourself if everything around you already says, I am here, and I am present with responsibility. I once met someone who barely spoke during a meeting, but the way he prepared his materials, the way he nodded attentively, the way he arrived on time and sat with purpose, all of it made others feel calm, made us feel he could be counted on. That is profound poise. It doesn't seek applause or compliments, and that is true attraction. Poise isn't for those chasing short-term validation. It's for those committed to intentional living, even in the smallest things. When you pay attention to every detail you send into the world, you're not just shaping an image, you're shaping your presence. The presence of someone mindful, responsible, principled, and always ready to act in alignment with what is right. And in a world full of empty words, that's what makes you impossible to ignore. Full presence. When you listen with your whole mind, people want to stay. In a scattered world where our attention is constantly hijacked by phone screens, blinking notifications, and surface-level conversations, there's one quality becoming increasingly rare: the power of full presence. Not everyone notices it, but there is a certain kind of person who brings a quiet peace just by being near. They don't need to speak much. They don't need to be particularly charming. But when you speak, they truly listen. No interruptions, no rush to respond. Their eyes stay on you. Their mind is with you. And that makes you want to linger a little longer, to share a little more. That's the power of presence. To be truly present isn't just about being physically there. It means showing up with full attention without letting your mind drift to undone tasks or fears of being judged. It means treating this moment as the only thing that exists. And something strange happens when you're able to be this present with someone. They remember you not because you said something clever, but because you made them feel seen. Stoicism teaches us that the only thing we truly possess is the present moment. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." Because it's only when you're really here that you can master your emotions, your interactions, and yourself. But when you listen only to reply, or when your mind races a few sentences ahead, you lose connection. The other person might not say it, but they feel it. The impatience, the wandering eyes, the fingers scrolling the phone, all are unspoken ways of saying, "I'm not really here." I once witnessed a leader not particularly eloquent, not visually striking, who had a remarkable quality. When you spoke to him, it felt like the world stood still. He didn't cut you off. He didn't rush you. He didn't check his phone. He looked at you like what you were saying mattered. And because of that, everyone respected him without needing to be told to. True presence is a form of meditation. When you communicate mindfully, you start noticing more unspoken feelings, fatigue behind someone's eyes, joy behind a subtle smile. You become empathetic. And empathetic people, without even trying, always become the center of meaningful moments. Want to practice presence? Start simple. Put your phone away when someone is speaking. Look into their eyes. Take a breath before responding. Don't chase clever replies, just be there. Put yourself in their shoes. Ask questions not to answer, but to understand. Because presence is the clearest proof that you respect both yourself and the other person. And when you live with that kind of attentiveness, you'll realize you don't need to be the smartest, the smoothest, or the most charismatic person in the room. You only need to be the most present one, and that's enough. People will feel it, and they will want to stay. Not because you said something profound, but because in a noisy world, you made them feel heard, seen, and truly there with you. Selective silence. Keep part of yourself untold, so others want to know more. In an age where people share everything with a single tap, discretion has become rare. But there is a kind of person who still sparks curiosity, not because they overshare, but because they choose to hold something back. They're not cold, they're not playing games, but they don't lay everything bare on the surface. The most meaningful parts of their story are shared intentionally at the right time. with the right person. The rest, they keep like a quiet garden protected from meaningless exposure. Silence, when used well, is a kind of art. And the Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus said, "Be silent, or let your words be worth more than silence." Real attraction doesn't come from telling everything about yourself during the first meeting. It comes from how you leave others wanting to know more. You give the sense that there are hidden layers, that some parts of you are only revealed to those who are patient, sincere, and worthy. People who keep something for themselves are not hiding. They are simply living with boundaries. They understand that not everyone deserves access to every story, every emotion, every sacred corner of their soul. And this selectiveness, in itself, becomes a form of respect, both for themselves and for those who truly earn their trust. I once met a woman like this. During our conversation, she didn't share much about herself, but every word she spoke revealed depth, experience, and extraordinary listening. I didn't know much about her by the end of the evening, but I kept thinking about her long after, because behind that quiet strength, I sensed a whole world of which I'd only glimpsed the edge. You don't need to list all the things that make you special. Sometimes, what makes you special is the silence, deliberate, chosen, powerful. When you don't rush to present yourself, you give others a chance to wonder, to reflect, to feel. Ask yourself, am I sharing this to create real connection, or because I'm afraid of being forgotten? When you share from peace, not from fear, your words become clearer and stronger. Selective silence is also a sign of inner strength. You don't feel the need to always be on stage. You know that some powers don't need to be proven. That quiet confidence, paired with deep presence, draws people not to hear more, but to understand more. In the end, living with a touch of silence is choosing to keep a sacred space inside, a space where you don't need to explain, where you are simply yourself without needing recognition. And in a world of oversharers with nothing meaningful to say, the one who keeps something for themselves is the one who lingers longest in others' minds. Depth of understanding. When you live beyond yourself, you naturally become captivating. There's a type of person who never needs to raise their voice to be heard, nor boast to be perceived as intelligent. When you speak with them, it feels like they've lived many lives. They don't just talk about themselves, they open new perspectives. They don't just give information, they inspire with the depth of their thought. And that's the result of one thing: genuine understanding, not for show, but for connection. Deep knowledge doesn't mean knowing everything. It means choosing to live with a learning mindset. You don't stay locked in your own experiences. You don't stay confined to the comfort zone of what's familiar. You're curious about people, the world, and different ways of living. And that curiosity makes you quietly rich, natural, and captivating. Truly knowledgeable people never force others to listen. They don't lecture or interrupt to prove a point. They invite. They ask more than they answer. They listen actively, not waiting for their turn to speak, but listening to genuinely understand. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Look beneath the surface. Let not the merely apparent mislead you. To live by this is to continuously expand your perspective." To know that what you don't know is far bigger than what you do. Those who understand don't need to speak in every conversation. They don't argue to win. They know that wisdom lies in knowing when to speak and when to stay silent to let others shine. I once sat at a dinner table with an older gentleman during a conference. He stayed quiet the entire meal. But when a young person began sharing the challenges of a startup, he finally spoke, telling a story of his own failure, calmly, without ego. The table fell silent. Not because he was loud, but because every word landed. No one asked him to share, but everyone knew they had just learned something invaluable. True understanding doesn't need an introduction, it speaks for itself. Eventually, you realize people with depth don't just make others want to listen. They make others want to become better versions of themselves. To cultivate this, you don't need to memorize libraries or be an expert in every field. Start simply. Read daily not to remember, but to understand. Talk to people as if you truly want to know what they feel and think. Step outside familiar circles. Place yourself in new environments just to observe, to listen, to learn. Because captivating people aren't the ones with the most experience. They're the ones who can connect what they've learned with what others are going through. Depth of understanding, when paired with humility, is the most enduring kind of magnetism. Those with life experience don't need to speak much. Their presence speaks through how they listen, how they ask questions, and how they respond with balance. And when you live not just to understand yourself, but to understand others, you naturally become someone others want to be around. Not to be taught, but to be illuminated by your mindful, thoughtful presence. Compassion with boundaries. Kindness is not weakness, but the strength to choose when to stop. There is a common misconception that if you are kind, you must always be accommodating. That if you are compassionate, you must open your heart without limit. Always forgive. Always carry others' burdens. Always be the one who understands, even when others don't deserve it. But that is not the kind of compassion Stoicism teaches. The Stoics never ask you to be a doormat. They don't ask you to sacrifice yourself for blind kindness. They teach that true compassion can only come from a strong inner core, from a heart that knows its limits, from someone who can set boundaries without shutting off their heart. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Be tolerant with others, strict with yourself." That spirit does not mean tolerating all abuse. It means understanding others from a position of strength, not being swept away by emotions, and not letting someone else's weakness become the reason you sacrifice yourself. I once knew a woman who always helped her friends, always showed up when someone was in trouble, but over the years, she became exhausted, not because she didn't care, but because she didn't know when to stop. She was caught in the cycle of "I must save others," and forgot that she too needed protection, rest, and love from herself. Compassion must have boundaries, because when you give too much without recovering, you'll have nothing left to offer. When you always yield, people assume you don't need respect, and when you forgive unconditionally, you send the wrong message, that others don't need to change. True strength is knowing when to say no. It's the ability to remain silent when misunderstood, but also stand firm when disrespected. It's being able to empathize with someone's pain, but not letting their chaos consume you. Compassion is not about removing boundaries. It's about building them with love. I once saw a teacher. When a student insulted him, he didn't get angry, didn't retaliate, but he also didn't allow that student to remain in his class. He simply said, "I am always ready to forgive, but I will not let wrongdoings continue in the silence of my tolerance." That calmness was not weakness. It was integrity. Ask yourself, what is my kindness nurturing? If it's helping others grow, then keep going. But if it's making them dependent, avoidant, or disrespectful, then it's time to step back. Because that's no longer compassion. That's complicity. To be kind in this world is a courageous choice, but kindness without limits will make you lose yourself. Be kind to others and to yourself. Don't just be someone others lean on, be a foundation from within. So when you give, you're not depleted. Compassion with boundaries doesn't make you less kind. In fact, it makes your kindness stronger, clearer, and more trustworthy. And that is the kind of kindness that has weight. The kind that not only earns gratitude, but inspires change. Because kindness is not just to soothe. Kindness is to guide. And sometimes, a gentle refusal holds more healing than 1,000 easy comforts. Inner joy, when you can smile through hardship, it's a sign of emotional maturity. There is a very special kind of attractiveness, one that doesn't come from appearance, talent, or knowledge, but from something deeper, quieter, inner joy, a person who can truly smile, not to hide their sadness, but because they've learned to live in harmony with life's ups and downs, always brings a sense of ease to those around them. In today's world, where stress seems default, and everyone is swept up in invisible pressures from work, expectations, and comparisons, a person who is calm, content with little things, is a refreshing breeze. They don't exaggerate their achievements, nor do they complain about what's incomplete. They choose to live simply, but fully in each moment. Epictetus once said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." True wealth lies not in what you own, but in how much you need to feel enough. A person with inner joy has learned this. They don't chase instant gratification, nor do they rely on society's must-haves. They choose simplicity, live with gratitude, and experience life with mindful awareness. I once met a man on a trip to the mountains. He repaired bicycles for a living each day. He ate plain rice with wild greens and lived in a small wooden house. But he had this unique smile, gentle, deep, and calming to everyone I asked, "Don't you feel sad living with so little?" He simply replied, "As long as I can still fix bikes for people, I feel useful. What is there to be sad about?" That wasn't naivety, that was wisdom. Inner joy doesn't mean you must always be cheerful. It means you know how to return to your center, even when the world outside is chaotic. It means you don't let sadness linger too long, nor let fleeting happiness steer you off course. A joyful person has learned to let go of expectations, of the need to control everything. They don't hide their pain, but they don't let pain redefine who they are. You can start small. Spend a few minutes each day doing nothing. Observe your breath. Write down 3 things you're grateful for each night. Spend time in nature, with a cup of tea, or a conversation without any agenda. When you stop looking for happiness outside, you begin to find it within. And then, something wonderful happens. A person with inner joy doesn't try to spread anything, but their energy naturally draws others close. They don't need to be the center, but they're always remembered. Because in a world full of competition, they're unhurried. In a world full of pretense, they're genuine. And in an age that demands more, faster, better, they remind us, living more deeply is enough. They are the embodiment of emotional maturity, not shaken by hardship, not controlled by short-term emotions. And when you begin to live that way, slowly, quietly, you realize your smile no longer comes from temporary satisfaction, but from true peace. And someone who can smile through adversity is no longer attractive because they want to impress, but because they've become wholly and freely themselves. There is a truth the Stoics understand well. If you don't know how to care for yourself, you cannot truly care for anyone else in a deep and lasting way. There's nothing selfish about resting when you need to, saying no when you must, and dedicating time to nourish yourself physically, mentally, and emotionally. Seneca once wrote, "A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary. A person who exhausts themselves before the world does is doubling their suffering." Self-care is not just going to the spa, eating well, or working out. It's about living with discipline, boundaries, and love for yourself. It's listening to your body when it's tired, your mind when it's overwhelmed, your heart when it's hurt, and instead of pretending to be fine, you pause to heal. I once met a woman who gave everything to her family. She worked 12-hour days, took care of meals, sleep, her children's studies, aging parents, fulfilled every role, until one day she collapsed from exhaustion. The saddest part was, She had never felt she had the right to rest. But in that moment, when she began to learn how to love herself, her whole family also learned how to value her more. Self-respect isn't about being selfish. It's knowing that if you don't build a solid inner foundation, every external connection will be fragile. How you care for yourself is a message you send to the world. I know I have value. And when you act accordingly, others will learn to treat you the same way. Start with the small things. Sleep enough, eat decently, move your body, but more importantly, start being honest with yourself. How are you feeling? Are you tired? Is this relationship draining you? Then, make choices to protect yourself, whether that's a courageous conversation or a necessary departure. Don't wait until your body speaks through illness, your mind through crisis, or your heart through cold silence. Listening to yourself every day, that is the highest act of self-respect. And when you live like that, people will notice, because someone who cares for themselves, quietly and consistently, always radiates a very special energy, the energy of independence, of self-worth, of someone who has truly grown. No need to assert it, no need to justify it. The respect you give yourself, shown in the way you live, choose, and hold your boundaries, will be the most powerful message you ever send to the world. And when you know how to love yourself with integrity, you'll know how to love others more deeply, more gently, without attachment, and without blind sacrifice. That's the beginning of every healthy relationship. That's the foundation of a meaningful life. And that's how, day by day, you become irreplaceable, not because you try to stand out, but because you live in truth with who you are. This is the essence of emotional intelligence, a quiet yet compelling form of strength. It's not loud, not performative. It lives in how you remain clear-headed when others lose their temper, in how you don't get pulled into petty clashes, and in how you can step back and see the bigger picture rather than getting caught up in the details. Epictetus once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." Those who truly embody emotional intelligence understand this. They don't rush to argue, nor do they stay silent to avoid conflict. They listen to understand, not to respond. I once witnessed a workplace situation where a young employee was publicly criticized for a small mistake. The room tensed up, but instead of defending or blaming anyone, the team leader simply asked, "How do you feel about this?" Just one gentle question, no raised voice, no defense, no accusation, but it made the young employee feel seen. And from that point, everything else became easier to say. Observation is not passive. It is the choice of someone in control, someone who understands that not everything deserves a reaction, and that silence is often more powerful than words sometimes. Just sitting still and recognizing the emotion rising within you is already a powerful act. As you cultivate this ability to observe, you begin to notice what you used to overlook: someone's anxious eyes, a silence heavy with unspoken words, a sentence rooted in fear rather than truth. And that's how you stop being deceived by appearances or dragged into meaningless battles. People with high emotional intelligence aren't emotionless. They understand emotions. They see the anger in themselves, but don't let it take the wheel. They acknowledge sadness, but don't let it blur their vision. They enter conversations with curiosity, not judgment. They engage with an open heart, guided by clear reason. You can practice this daily. Before responding to an irritating message, pause for 5 seconds. Before rebutting someone, ask, "Do I want to win this argument or understand what the other person is really thinking?" Before making a decision in the heat of emotion, go for a walk. Breathe, observe your feelings as if from a distance, then act. Emotional intelligence doesn't come from theory. It's born from mindful practice in everyday interactions. When you learn to take a step back and see more clearly, you not only understand others, you begin to understand yourself. And from there, every action, every word you choose carries more weight and comes from a place of strength and clarity. Such people, though they don't shout or dominate, always earn others' attention because they don't speak to impress. They speak to connect. They don't react to win. They act to clarify what is right. They show up with both mind and heart, and that is why they are trusted, respected, and quietly captivating. Living with consistency. Trust is built through silent actions, not declarations. There is a kind of magnetism that doesn't come from looks, words, or achievements, but from consistency, from how you live in alignment with your values, even when no one's watching, no one applauding, no one praising. That is the true foundation of lasting and trustworthy attraction. You could be charismatic, impressive in your presentation, inspiring in conversation, but if your actions contradict your words, the respect others have for you will gradually fade. People aren't persuaded by words, they're convinced by consistent behavior over time. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one." That's a simple yet piercing reminder. Your value isn't in declarations, but in the quiet consistency of your daily actions. Those who live with consistency don't need to prove anything. They simply live rightly. When they say they'll show up, they arrive on time. When they make a promise, they keep it, or they communicate changes honestly. When they choose a path, they stay the course, or they retreat for the right reasons, not out of convenience. I once had a friend not particularly outspoken, not especially sociable, but in every situation, they kept their word, did what they said, never made excuses. They never bragged, never sought praise. But whenever someone needed a reliable person, they were the one everyone turned to. Because consistency builds credibility, and credibility can't be faked. Consistency is also a clear sign of emotional maturity. Those who change on a whim, act unpredictably, or live with double standards are often guided more by emotion than by core values. In contrast, those with strong internal foundations stay the course, even when no one's watching. Behavioral consistency also reflects self-respect and respect for others. When you choose to live kindly, you don't act courteously only to those who benefit you. When you live by principles, you don't break them for fleeting pleasures. And when you live authentically through steady repetition, you don't need to perform. You just need to show up. Consistent people give others a sense of safety. They don't suddenly turn hostile, change their mind erratically, or make promises just for show. Each action is like a small mark, gradually forming a clear portrait of who they are. And when others look back, they see something trustworthy, and that is more attractive than any glamour. Ask yourself, do your actions reflect what you believe in? Do your daily choices, no matter how small, clarify or blur the person you aspire to become? You don't have to be perfect, but you do need to be genuine, and the same in easy and hard times, with or without an audience. That kind of consistency creates a quiet charisma, one that time cannot diminish, only deepen. Eventually, you won't have to make an impression. People will simply feel, this is someone real, someone of value, someone who stands firm in what they choose even in silence. And that is the most lasting kind of magnetism. Clear life purpose. When you know where you're going, the noise around you can't distract you. In a world full of temptations where everyone is rushing to be recognized, where the noise of social media, trends, and endless invitations constantly surrounds us, someone who knows exactly where they're headed, what they live for,